Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast, talking entrepreneurship, business, and marketing. This week's guest is economist, consultant, and author, Dr. Rod Wallace. I got to tell you, Rod, that the one class that I got the lowest grade in college, I just graduated in April, was economics. And it's weird because I liked the class. I studied hard in the class, but the teacher didn't allow us to have open books. I only got a B in the class.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Bob. We can do better, Bob.
Of course we can. Rod, you're a business strategist. What does a business strategist actually do?
So a business strategist is just a fancy word for planning. And so, the bulk of my time is like, we want to grow in Europe and Asia, and we want to shrink in, our presence in South America. But the really interesting part of that is taking the step back and saying what's really going on in the world, because that plan of we want to grow in Europe and Asia should be based on what's really going on in the world. And that's the interesting part where we say, okay, so why is it that, it seems that technology growth as measured by an economist has shrunk since 1980, or it's been a lot slower since 1980 than it had been before 1980, even though you look at all of the amazing stuff that's come out, like computers and cell phones and artificial intelligence, and you go, wow, the most amazing technology ever, and we're scared of, people being replaced by machines, and yet the economists say that economic growth has slowed during that time.
Now, you say we want to grow, and then we want to shrink. We want to grow what? We want to grow our presence as American businesses? We want to grow our what?
Basically, it's what we talk about is GDP, which is basically the total value of everything produced in the United States. So you think, we've got, 270 million people in the U.S., something like that.
Okay.
And if we produce, $50,000 of stuff per person, that's better than if we only produce $25,000 of stuff per person.
So you're talking gross domestic product. That's what the GDP is. That's what we're trying to grow. Okay. Because I always try to make it as simple as possible. Because when people are listening, sometimes your head's in the clouds. Sometimes they're, it's kind of on as a background. Sometimes they're, paying full close attention. So I try to make things as simple as possible for people that are listening.
Well, the part that's really interesting is that we have an increasing number of people that are going to college and are getting educated, and that seems like it's fantastic. In fact, it is nice. But at the same point, we are in a country where at more than half of the public universities, 1/3 of the seniors, the people in the last year, cannot make a cohesive argument. They cannot assess the quality of evidence in a document or interpret a table. So we're going to school forever. It's just that we don't seem to be necessarily learning a whole lot the whole time we're going.
So what do you suggest we do in place of that?
I think that what we need to do is first and foremost understand more clearly what it is that we're trying to get out of our educational system. Mm-hmm. Right now, everyone is going through and improving little pieces of the educational system. We have a bunch of teachers that are really awesome, and that most of them care about our kids. Not all of them, but most of them do. And, then we have a really cool programs that are supposed to design to take kids that are behind, grade level and bring them up to grade level. And then we have other programs that are designed to take kids who are physically and mentally handicapped and mainstream them. And each one of those things is really awesome. The problem is that when you combine them all, what you have is that you have, the teacher is trying to help these, 5 first graders who are behind first grade level enter like 17-digit code into the computer to take their weekly standardized test, and the rest of the school is the classroom is just going haywire. We have to be much clearer about what we want from education, and once we do that, then we can actually develop a system that would do that well.
Well, let me ask this then. I mean, I hate to say this word, but I mean, should we segregate kids then? Put, the kids that are a little bit smarter in this group and little kids that are not as smart in this group and kids that are trailing in this group?
Rather than a specific solution, I think that it's more important to say, well, what is the purpose of education? Is it just to teach our kids a certain set of skills? If so, then having different kids in different classrooms probably makes good sense. On the other hand, if the purpose of education is to really help people collaborate and work together, and that's the most important thing that we want from our school system, then having all kinds of different kids in the same classroom is probably going to be helpful because it provides different challenges than we'd have otherwise. It really depends on the goal of what is the school for.
Rod Wallace is our guest. We're talking about his book, Drowning in Potential. What's your book about, Rod?
My book is about the impact of digital technology on American society. And what's really happened is that as we've used digital technology, computers and cell phones, it has changed the nature of our interactions with each other. I mean, you think about, you see all the pictures of people sitting around a table with their cell phone, looking at the cell phone rather than actually talking to each other.
Right.
And those types of things it's much broader than that, because what's happened is that we have both become more distant from each other, which is, people sitting around the table, but we've also increased the complexity of our world in incredible ways, in some awesome ways. We now have, 3 different types of physicians that are specialists in different types of ways of studying the human heart. That's pretty cool. I mean, there's all these people who are specialists on, a little part of the heart. The challenge is that now we have a nurse in the average urban hospital has to work with 130 different types of specialists. And if that collaboration doesn't work well, then our health system doesn't work well. Oh, wait, our American health system doesn't work well. And so even though we have this awesome technology that's available, and it's truly spectacular what we can do, the lifespan of the American people has actually shrunk the last 2 years.
Well, I've read something about that just the other day about how it has shrunk, but a lot of that is due to the fact that there's so much opioid addiction out there and heroin addiction that's out there. I guess heroin and opioids are the same, but meth and things like that the drugs have basically taken us down a couple of notches. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well?
Oh, definitely. But you have to go another step deeper. Well, what is the reason why some of these, suicide is another major reason for the increasing suicides. So what is increasing suicide and increasing opioid abuse really related to? And that's coming to the fact that people have less and less relationships with each other and meaningful ones. If you think about 3 different factors, a close human connection with somebody else, obesity, and tobacco use. Which one do you think is actually the most indicative of how long you're going to live?
I would say the human interaction. Honestly, I really would think that.
And as we're having trouble with human interaction because we're not sure how to apply that digital technology in a way that really brings us together, that is part of a big chunk of the reason why we're running into problems with, the opioids and suicides. And it's very difficult to say that, that's the cause. No, there's lots of causes. But one of the big ones is that we're losing the human connections. We're increasing the complexity of our world. We can't figure out, where we're trying to go in the world. And we have some pretty negative unintended consequences.
Rod, how do we stop that then? How do we stop the addiction to the phones and the addiction to the electronics and the, everything else, and then go back to, playing games on a Saturday night with the family around the kitchen table?
Part of it is exactly what you just said. I mean, in your own family, that we have the choices of saying, stop it. Phones aren't allowed at the dinner table and we can play games. But as a society, we actually have to shift and think about the types of tools that we use to work together a little bit differently. Because 10,000 years ago, humans created the agricultural technology. We learned how to farm. And it may seem, independent of how we structure society, but it's really interconnected. That before farming, you and I would have been, generalists, and we would have hunted coyotes one day or something. And if we failed, well, not a big deal. We'll gather berries the next. But with agriculture, we're going to farm and we're going to spend like months on one crop. And if we fail, our families are going to starve. So we're going to specialize in farming. And so we need to develop all kinds of economic systems and social systems to support one person being a farmer and another person being a bureaucrat and another person being et cetera, et cetera. And we created specialization. Well, now 10,000 years later, we're really good at specialists. So we have all kinds of people that are specialists. I mean, in my Rolodex, I got a guy who's really good at helping people with public relations and for their plumbing and HVAC businesses. Well, that is quite a specialized niche. So, but how do we all work together? That's where we're running into problems, is saying, how do we get all of these groups of specialists to work together and collaborate? And so, as I talked about with education a little bit ago, it's about making sure that we understand where, as a group, we're trying to get to and use all of our amazing technology and knowledge.
Is it possible, though, to do that? Because it seems as though people fight against each other all the time.
People definitely fight against each other all the time, and the digital technology where, the person who's using Facebook 14 times a day at three minutes a pop is not going to get into a wonderful, deep conversation about, how their view of the world should be changed because they're wrong in something. No, you're right. This whole technology is pushing us to fight against each other. But we can. And I use an example of the chocolate industry. Most people like chocolate. I love it. And it turns out that the chocolate industry, 70% of the cocoa, which is, a key ingredient in chocolate, is grown in Western Africa, where they have a whole bunch of social issues in terms of education, child labor, women's rights, environmental issues, and they're all complex issues interconnected with one another. But the chocolate industry across more than 100 different companies has said, you know what? We are going to create a shared vision for what the cocoa societies should look like and to be a sustainable industry in terms of improving education and social issues and environmental issues. And they're working together according to have a very clear vision of how they're going to help those, the Ivory Coast and Ghana and some of the other countries develop and strengthen their societies in those ways. And then once they've done that, they are going to benefit in terms of profit because they'll get more cocoa and they'll get higher quality cocoa. But society benefits. And once they've done that, then of course, Nestle and Mars and Hershey's will compete to get you to buy their chocolate. But they work together on society.
Well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, economically, I think if you co-op, if everybody works together for a common good, it's going to help the economy grow, right? I mean, is that basically what the simplest way of looking at it is?
They are working together, but only on certain things. So it's maintaining the capitalist system that, Nestle and Hershey's are going to compete their buns off to try and sell you their chocolate. But they are working together, or it's not even necessarily working together, but they're saying they're sharing a vision of what Western Africa is going to look like, and then saying, okay, they're going to each commit to doing pieces of that while maintaining this whole capitalist system of competing against each other.
You had mentioned specialized a couple of different times in our conversation. In your mind as an economist, is it better for us to be specialized in specific things, or is it better to have kind of a general knowledge of a lot of different things?
Right now, the economy requires for us as individuals to be specialists. I mean, everyone talks about how you need to have your niche little specialization in, how to do A, B, or C. At the same point, people who are able to pull together different areas of specialization tend to be more successful today. And so if you can pull together people from different areas, then you can, get a broader perspective, and that seems to be a good thing. And as a society, the real question is, how do we take all of these people who are micro specialists and bring them together?
Is there a solution to that, Rod?
There better be, because this is where I mean, I got three kids, a 3, 4, and 12-year-old, and we're gonna give them the society that we create. And if we don't bring them together, then they're going to have a lot of problems. And yes, I do think that we can. But we have to begin to think about and develop those tools that will be more effective at bringing people together while maintaining the strength of, our capitalist society, our democracy, and the other things that we've developed for other types of technologies.
You mentioned you had 3 kids. I have 4 myself, and I think back to when they were your children's ages, and I thought about, the way that things are going, and, there are hurdles that we had to jump over. And then you look at our parents and our parents' parents, our grandparents and our parents, and they probably thought the same things that we're feeling, that with this rock and roll music, with, people are listening to, people are driving now, or, there's always something, there's always a hurdle that's going to be there. How do we traverse those things so that way we can end up, being the best society that we can be, or are we just going to kind of continue along the same path?
And this is where I think that the fact base has to be careful, because there's always a certain element of society that is, degenerating. And, I bet, 5,000 years ago, people were saying, oh, those kids these days. But one of the things that I did in the course of the 2 years full-time research for my book, Drowning in Potential, was I said, well, what is going on across American culture and government and economy? And particularly over the last 40 to 50 years, what are the parts that have really blossomed and done it particularly well, and which are the parts that have not? And the problem that I found is that really starting between 1970 and 1980, the issues in our economy and in our American culture and in government in terms of the benefits they are able to deliver for our citizens have not done very well. In our economy right now, 60% of the U.S. economy is dedicated to industries failing to deliver basics that they should be. We talked a little bit about education, which is by many general metrics failing. Our healthcare system is doing a little bit better in terms of, our lives are a little bit longer than they were in 1970, but we're spending twice as much as the people in the average developed country, and we have the shortest lives in the developed world. Our food, we got 47,000 foods in the supermarket. Awesome. But those foods aren't really nourishing us, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that damn Twinkie.
Damn Twinkie. Well, the Twinkie that you just ate yesterday was probably made in 1950, and it's still good. So, some things are good.
Have you ever taken a Peep, the candy, the Peep, and opened up the package, eaten it, left the package open, it gets hard, and then like 5 or 6 days later, it's soft again? You ever wonder what kind of genetically modified garbage is in that stuff? I think about that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's one of the areas. I mean, food is an area that I've spent probably over a decade working in the food industry. And food is kind of interesting because you think about it, when I buy my kids a breakfast sandwich, like in all its processed glory, I feel so guilty and horrible about what I'm doing. But in most industries, technology, you go, oh man, that's so technological. It's cutting edge, man. That's positive. And in the food industry, we have issues with the food that we have amazing technology to make more healthful food, but we're applying only the technology to cut costs and to make things taste good.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So how can Drowning in Potential, your book, how can that help the small business, Rod?
The ways that this can help the small business is first and foremost understanding what's really going on around us so that we can understand what the trends are. Secondly, perhaps really key, is that there are a number of different business models out there for taking advantage of what's going on. That one of the big challenges in society that I've talked about is that we've talked about is how do we collaborate more effectively? And businesses that can help, even some of the big businesses, collaborate across organizations more effectively, can make some good money with that. I'm working with an organization that is working to bridge the gap between corporate America and the African American community, and finding a way creatively to use historically black colleges and universities to make real inroads and benefits for society while allowing both sets of groups involved, corporate America and the African American community, end up with better jobs and better education and those types of things. And by being creative about it and by working on collaboration, the expectation is that they'll do very well financially as well.
Is it a group effort a lot of times? I mean, because we're talking about specialization, we're talking about getting together and stuff like that. But I mean, is the big picture is the solution? Everybody kind of letting down a little bit and letting people in and working together?
I definitely think at a very high level, that is really the key. I say that, I stand for collaboration, which means that my goal and my commitment is to helping develop innovative approaches that align self-interest in the common good. That I believe very strongly that, we're not going to a socialist system, or we're not going to some kind of, other type of system that has any chance possibly of working. But somehow we need to maintain this capitalist system, our democracy, and find ways to effectively collaborate and work together with all of our amazing knowledge and capabilities to do better.
It's kind of funny. We've touched on a lot of different topics, and I kind of want to circle back to one of the ones that we started off with, was more the technology and how that is kind of taken over a lot of our lives. Is there a way that we can make technology work well for us without the addiction part?
Yeah, that technology is a tool. And what our modern technology does is it provides the potential to do amazing things. That the ex-CEO of Google says that we are living in the age of abundance, because if we can use the technology that we have today to do anything that we want, and any type of society that we can envision, we can actually create. We have the technology, engineering-wise, to actually do. And so we can use this technology. The key challenge is making sure that we have a clear vision and we use that technology to the purposes that will actually deliver the benefits we want, as opposed to, just sitting in our little holes and digging ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper.
Rod, but isn't building a manufactured society, isn't that cause for issue or problems in the future?
Well, there's a number of issues that we are in the midst of redesigning our society. And the problem is that most societies that develop a transformational new technology fail. I mean, you go around the world today, and more than 80% of the people in the world are living on less than $10 a day. And yet, suppose that you are in the middle of Africa somewhere, and you are in your living room with a computer. You want to take a PhD level course on artificial intelligence and neural nets. What do? You just push a button and you find that course. The technology is available essentially equally all around the world. That's not the real problem. The real problem is ensuring that we have the cultural, governmental, and economic systems in place that we use that technology in a way that is successful. And for the last 150 years, the United States, along with Europe and along with Australia and Japan, have been far more effective than the vast majority of people in the world. Now we have a new technology, which means we need new types of systems that build on the existing ones that will take into account all the complexity out there. And yes, most societies, I expect, will not successfully do that. But we sure as heck better make sure that ours is successful at that.
Dr. Rod Wallace is our guest this week on the BS with Bob Schmidt podcast. The book is called Drowning in Potential. I guess the final question I have for you is, based on the title of your book, Drowning in Potential, is there a life vest that's out there that will help us to not drown in our potential, Rod?
Yes. It is a set of tools that are focused around new ways of collaboration. That's what the sixth chapter in the book is all about. One way is about a higher level of leadership that will help us organize and collaborate across organizations. A second piece is about ways to communicate and find meaning in all of the mass of data that we've got in terms of structuring the information we get so that we can actually communicate more effectively. And the third is ensuring that we develop the types of systems so that we use those amazingly human capabilities of storytelling and we challenge those in new ways. There is a lot more about that, both on my website, rodwallacephd.com, as well as on in the book, Drowning in Potential, that is available on Amazon and other fine places.
rodwallacephd.com for more information about the book, Drowning in Potential. You mentioned that it's available on Amazon. What else will we find on your website, Rod?
Some free giveaways that will give some examples of some organizations and some initiatives that have solved some of these collaboration issues. So if you have some questions about how do you actually structure something, perhaps make some money yourself about how on helping other people collaborate, come onto the website and you can download that for free.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com. And by Tri-State Sound and Light. Find them online at tristatesound.com. Tell your story with microcasts by podcastforhire.com. The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is a Podcast for Hire production.